Boro, Aboye, Aboshishe, Ekabo, and welcome to the Ifa Orisa tradition discussion. Today, we are going to discuss quite a few things, as this is the first episode for the calendar year of 2025. All right, I'd like to welcome again everyone, and I would open, as I normally do, first with an Iba. Ope ni fun Olorun, Olodumare Oba Ajiki, Mojiloni. All right. Ope ni fun Olorun, Olodumare Oba Ajiki, Mojiloni, Omogun Meriaye, Iba Ila Orun, Iba Iwo Orun, Iba Ariwa, Iba Gusu, Iba Oba Egba Aye, Iba Orun, okay, Iba Baba, Iba Yeye, Iba Atiwo Orun, Iba She, Igungun Kiki Igungun, Ashe Ori Ino, Ipori Atiwo Orun, Ashe, Ashe, Ashe. All right. Today we are going to have a very, very interesting show. We are going to discuss the condition of our people in the diaspora or in the Americas. We're going to discuss some aspects of the tradition and the importance of the role of our tradition in these times. All right. But before I get into the discussion of family and the role of family, I want to ask some fundamental questions, because today we are also going to look at the Willie Lynch letter, and we are also going to look at the plantation model that was used for slavery that has evolved into the modern economic system that we have today. So to start off the discussion, I'm going to ask a few questions and in some cases even suggest probable solutions to some of the troubles and problems that we have. All right, the first question is, do we have slavery today? All right, and the answer to that question is yes, because slavery never ended. All right, the way, for example, the U.S. Constitution was written, it stated that involuntary slavery was abolished. All right. So if one chooses to volunteer to be a slave by constitutional law, that is not a problem. If you choose to subjugate yourself to slavery or abuse, all right, which is another word for slavery. Then the next question is going to be, what in fact is slavery? All right. And the simple answer is that when one person is mistreating another person, that in essence constitutes slavery. Whether the basis of the mistreatment is race, age, or any other factor, it is still considered to be slavery. All right? And while I'm on that, let me talk a little bit about the word itself. If we were to look at an etymology dictionary to find out the original idea and the early usage of the word, you will discover that the root word of the word slave or slavery is Slav, S-L-A-V, which is in reality a nationality that is attributed to the Slavic people who lives in Slovakia. All right. How was this term brought to the Americas and used to identify a particular ethnic group or nationality of people? All right. That is a very amazing and interesting study to look into. So I will encourage viewers to go get an etymology dictionary, or there is also online etymology dictionaries where you could actually look for yourself and see the origin and the root of the word slave. All right, so let me continue. Now, white supremacy, which is something a lot of people do not understand. Many may have heard the term, but do not know exactly what it is in reference to. White supremacy is, in fact, a system of slavery. All right. The reason we refer to it as such is because it induces the mistreatment of persons based on color or skin color, if we want to be more specific. All right. This system of slavery that we refer to as white supremacy has been built into the various institutions that came out of the era of colonization. All right. So political systems, which in essence, most times we hear the term political, we think of political parties. We think about elections. But again, if we were to check the etymology of the word, we will discover that politics is only a term that was used originally in reference to the way in which a person socializes, the group of people that you associate with. All right? Now, beside white supremacy, the mistreatment of people based on color was introduced to the colonial political system of power. It was also introduced into the economic systems. All right. And when we speak of economics, we are talking about a structured system where time and energy is used to produce riches, capital, money, and wealth. All right. So I'm being very specific in explaining some of these terms and how it is used. All right. Now, mistreatment of persons based on color is one of the main problems we have. Later on, I'm going to look at a theory in social science, sociology in particular, that was called the Best and Levitz theory. All right, that was written by two individuals. One, Mr. Lloyd Best, who happens to be a Trinidadian, and the other co-author was Carrie Levitz. All right. One of the essays was called The Outline of a Model of Pure Plantation Economy, that was written in 1968. All right. But before I go all there, I'm going to go into family a little bit, and I'm also going to deal with a little bit of the Willie Lynch letter and the Willie Lynch syndrome, which happens to be one of the main problems that we suffer because of victims of white supremacy. All right. So let me talk now a little bit about family and the role that family play in the socialization process. All right. Because as a people, it is important for us to be able to unite in order so that we are able to move forward. All right. Even just before I even go there, just let me point this out. When a lot of people hear the term white supremacy, the first thing they say is, well, we living in a country where we don't really have to deal much with white people. So how is white supremacy a problem in a country like Trinidad? All right. As I've mentioned before, the political systems and the economic systems were built out of colonialism. So as built-in elements of these systems are different forms of injustice and prejudice, which are part and parcel of the system, as a result of which people are affected by these systems in ways that most of us do not clearly see. All right? Because these systems were not designed with the purpose of fair treatment and humanity. These systems, because of the colonial influence, were designed primarily to produce profit, okay, for the white slave masters. All right? Now, I'm certain for most of us who've been to school, who have had an opportunity to be exposed to movies and television, we would be familiar with the fact or the statement that is always used with regards to family, where family is referred to as the basic unit of socialization. All right, and by that, what they are generally referring to is the cultivation of a human mind within a household. All right, the values that are given to individuals by their parents, by their family, by their siblings, by their cousins, by their aunts, uncles, grandparents, etc., etc. All right, so if the family is the basic socializing unit within the society, then the question that one has to ask is, among our people, why do we find ourselves in a situation where we are producing delinquent children? And why are our family units dysfunctional? All right? I'm going to go into a little bit of history to talk about a few things. But the main reason for us having this problem is because we were cut off from our tradition and our culture, as a result of which our people suffer from severe identity crisis together with some of the effects of abuse, which manifests itself in the various forms of trauma. All right? The question then goes, after one is cut off from one culture and one tradition, and one suffers from an identity crisis and also from trauma due to the abuses that were laid on us during the times of colonization or slavery, if you want to use that term. The next logical question would be, what forces changed our reality? Because beside being cut off from our tradition, then the other thing that was very prevalent was the influencing forces that created or recreated our ancestors into different types of human beings with different ideas, different concepts? Well, the answer for that is there are many, many factors. However, we're going to look at a few of the factors that would have influenced the way we have become, all right? How the family unit has become dysfunctional. Now, one of the main things is when we were cut off from our culture, we were not allowed, when we were brought here, many of us, to bring with us the dietary practices, nor the foods that we normally would have consumed prior to colonization. All right, and this would apply also to many of the indigenous peoples who were here. Because of colonization, the colonial system would have introduced their traditions and their customs together with their dietary practices. All right, and one of the important things about diet is whatever you eat affects your overall health and well-being. And included in your overall health is one's mental health, the way that one mind would function. All right? So now let's look now at some of the factors, of course, that shaped the reality of our people in the way that it is today. Now, the broad category for these changes can be classified as education. Some people would say programming. All right? One of the main institutions came out of colonization also, is what today we have in the modern form of what is called the mass media. All right? Newspapers, magazines, online. Now we have telephones, which are in fact now actually computers. That is a major aspect of what we call mass media. We have schools, that is part of the education and the socialization process for our people. We have church and religion. We have music, and we have entertainment in general. All right? Whether it be sporting, whether it be going out restaurant, whether it be visiting the mall, whether it be going to a movie, all of these fall into the category of entertainment. So, despite the family unit being the basic unit of socialization, the reality is there are many other forces that influence our minds. And I've just mentioned some of them. But one of the main solutions for our people to correct all of the things that I just identified is the first thing is we need to re-embrace our culture and our tradition. That's one of the first things that are required to gain a sense of self and a sense of identity. Now, in terms of the education and the programming, the other thing that we need to do is we need to take back or to take control of the things that influence our minds. So we should have our own media propagating the type of information that would produce unity among our people. We need to have our own schools, our own educational institutions We need to have our own religious organizations. All right. And keeping in mind that religion is only a small aspect of tradition and culture. We need to produce our own music that would influence the minds of our people positively. We need to have entertainment and recreational activities that would allow us to develop as a people, as a community, with a greater sense of who we are or of identity. All right. So now I'm going to go a little bit now into tradition as it relates to our culture, as it relates to our identity. All right. On many streams before, I have spoken about the history of our people on the island of Trinidad and Tobago. And I have explained that many different nations visited this island at different points in history. And because of that, we are, in fact, a conglomeration of many different nations. Babes, look at our phone and see what's coming up on it. So because of this, we have to consider all of the different contributors to our genetic pool. All right? But let's talk a little bit about family and our culture and tradition. Our society, meaning those who make up our community, holding different positions, holding different responsibilities, we need to find ways, and of course, in reaffirming our tradition and culture, we would be able to understand and to know the place that everybody must hold and the role that they must play. And the question becomes, what would we be modeling ourselves after? Where would we find a pattern? Well, our ancestors who lived before us, who were not victims of abuse and slavery, had a system that was working and that was successful. All right? That system, even though it applies to us who live here on earth, was designed based on the model of what existed in Orun. The term that is used in Yoruba to describe these things are egbe. The word egbe is in reference to a society or a community. Every human being who is alive on earth before coming to earth would have been a part of a community and a society in Orun. Once you were also born here on earth, you would have chosen what family you were going to be a part of. And you would have also had peers that were part of your society in Orun who would have also migrated here to be born on earth in your lifetime. Those are referred to as your Egbe Aye. All right? Among those within your society and community, you would have elders, All right. And among those in your society, in Orun, you would have ancestors. All right. That is sometimes referred to as Igungun. All right. But Igungun also include primordial ancestors, which is something that we would speak of in another lesson. Right. But generally, when we speak of ancestors, we speak of those on earth who lived before us in our own lineage. There are other categories of persons who are classified as ancestors who may not necessarily be one's blood relatives. But generally, when you hear the term ancestor, it is in reference to one's blood relatives. All right? Now, as a community, we participate in very specific activities that are aimed at bringing the community together. And one of them we're going to look at this evening is Igungun. All right? The Igungun masquerade is a colorful and vibrant celebration which brings members of the community together to honor the Igungun, which is in fact a symbol of our ancestors. During this community festival, masked performers dressed in elaborate costumes of different colors represent a variety of diverse ancestors, including our primordial or the first beings who were the seeds of our existence. In celebrating Igungun, we show respect for our ancestors. We seek their blessings as a means of showing our strong connections or bonds to the legacy they left for us in the form of our cultural heritage. This is one of the many deep spiritual rituals that symbolize our unity between the physical community here on earth and the spiritual community in Orun. Among the various masquerades, we also have those that are called Oro. These masquerades come out at night and is not open, it's not an open activity to the public. Non-initiates, including women, foreigners, and children, must stay inside. This functions to ward off evil and to protect the community, bringing in an energy or the energy of justice. All right? Beside Oro, most other classes of masquerade is celebrated publicly, where everyone is allowed to participate. As all of these activities are in fact community-based events celebrating ancestors. All right? Now, I spoke of this so that we would understand that a major part of our tradition involves community and family. And this here is one example. There are many other rituals that are a part of the tradition that incorporates the community. So again, I want to talk now a little bit about the situation we find ourselves in as a society, and that affects the entire nation and not just our community. Why we should be concerned about these things is because, in fact, most of the persons who find themselves being victims, murders, gun violence, homicides, assaults, happen to be people like us who should in fact belong to our community and society. What are the probable solutions we should be looking at to bring about these change? Well, some people don't think that this is their problem because these things haven't affected them personally. But as a nation, we should all be concerned about these things. So some of the solutions that I've suggested earlier, I'm going to go through some of them again, is we must redeem that which we lost, which is our culture and tradition, so that we can have a sense of true self-identity. Having a sense of identity and a sense of value, this should assist us to stop the self-destructive behavior. The second thing we need to also look at, beside regaining what we lost, which is the first point, we now have to lose what we have been given that only serves to destroy us. And when I go through the Willie Lynch letter, I'm going to give you the exact things that we need to lose and to get rid of. And the third, and one of the also very important things we need to do, is we need to engage in productive activities. All right? Because that would lead us to self-sustainability, and it would also take us away from engaging in idle activities that are destructive. All right? I hope everybody understands what I just explained, because I'm trying to use the most simple terms. All right? Now, I'm going to give a little bit of history, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the Best and Levitt's theory. All right? And how today we are still plagued with some of the effects of colonialism in our behaviors, in our attitudes. All right? And most of it is simply a reaction because of trauma. While we may not be aware of all the factors that affect our behavior and our lives, because the same systems that existed during the colonial era still persist today, we are affected and we cannot even see the causes of our behavior. All right? So let me talk a little bit about the Best and Levitt theory. All right? Basically, what they did is they give an example, they explain how the plantation economy operated. All right. This document was written in 1968. All right, by Lloyd Best and Carrie Levitt. All right. Now, some of the things that we must consider is that the colonies that were developed in the Caribbean served as the model for the development of the economic systems of the British. The main island that was used during the 15th century, around 1641, was the Barbadian plantations. They were in fact British model colonies or British crown colonies. All right. And from the plantation, the slave plantations of Barbados, the greatest amount of profits was made by the British. The French and the Spanish made extreme wealth from the Dominican Republic and Haiti. All right? But the emphasis of this particular essay was the development of the colonial system by the British. So between 1641 and 1680, they developed what they considered to be a successful economic model. All right? Now, I want to point out that the establishment of these colonial colonies was not always based purely on African labor. We had the Sephardim refugees first working in these colonies, most of them from Portugal and some of them from Spain. All right. And later on, when they introduced Africans, all right, and I don't want to just say Africans because they also introduced many indigenous people, meaning black-skinned people like Caribs from the Americas, including from the mainland North America. All right. They were so successful in designing a colonial economic model in Barbados that they established some of the other islands such as Jamaica, Suriname, Carolina, and several of the southern states in North America or in the US. But the other major project that was undertaken in 1640 was the development of an island off of Madagascar, the northern part of Madagascar, called Asada. They took this place is also in the southwestern Indian Ocean. All right. What they did is they patterned the plantation economy there after the model that they built in Barbados. They also went on. They attempted to develop one in 1680 in the South Atlantic, which failed basically because of the weather. All right, but nonetheless, what they used to establish these various colonies outside of the Caribbean and in Jamaica and other parts of the Caribbean, they used the laws and the customs of Barbados, which is the records that they kept while they were there. All right? And they stated that with the rigorous discipline that was enforced on the slaves in Barbados, they would have been able to have success with this model economically wherever they decided to establish such. All right? By 1650, the model for economic development, of course, as I keep mentioning, the standard model was Barbados. In 1672, the Royal African Company was established in West Africa with these same principles. And of course, the main investors was the royal family of Britain, or the British royal family. All right? So I simply gave all of these examples so that we would understand even the modern system of economics that we have today was developed on colonial rules of unfair treatment of Africa. So therefore, it's inherently based on white supremacy or the ruling of the slave master. With that backdrop now, I'm going to go now to identifying the source of trauma, source of fear, the source of distrust, the source of envy and enmity that exists in our people, that would cause our people to destroy each other with very little effort by the white supremacists and by the colonial masters. All right, I'm going to make reference here to the Willie Lynch letter of 1712. Now, if you observe those dates, you would know that the colonial system of economics was already well established by 1712. Based on the information I just shared, it was well established between 1641 and 1680. So by the time Mr. Willie Lynch came around to running his behavioral experiments on slaves, the economic aspect of slavery and of colonial economics was already established. But Mr. Lynch, Willie Lynch to be exact, in 1712 visited Virginia, where he was explaining to many of the slave owners, the white supremacists, the colonizers, that they no longer needed to lynch and hang their slaves. It's an irony that hanging a slave on a tree was called lynching when the individual who actually encouraged them to eliminate the hanging of their assets, because that is how they viewed Africans, not as humans, that they should desist from destroying their labor force. And this is what he said in his own words. And I'm reading verbatim from the document that came as part of a kit that was associated to the Willie Lynch approach of creating a slave. He said, the black slave, after receiving this indoctrination, shall carry on and will become self-refueling and self-generating for hundreds of years, maybe thousands. All right, and let me mention something I didn't say, but I will say it at this point. When Willie Lynch was riding into Virginia on his way into the estate, he smelt the rotting corpse of an African that was hung from a tree. And as he got there into the meeting with all the slave owners and slave masters, he addressed that and make it clear to them that they don't ever have to go down that avenue again. Because what he come to offer them is going to eliminate all of their problems of ruling their slaves. All right? I'm going to read another document. I'm going to read another paragraph or another statement he made in his document. He said, "Gentlemen, these kits, right, are your key to control. Use them. Have your wives and children use them. Never miss an opportunity. My plan is guaranteed, and the good thing about this plan is that if used with intensity for 1 year, the slaves themselves will remain perpetually distrustful of each other." So the next thing we would ask is, what was in this kit? What it is that he was telling these people they need to do? So I'm going to tell you now. What he told them is that they simply have to look for differences within their human labor stock and point out these differences to each one of them. And in doing so, he would get them to mistrust each other, to envy each other, and to fear each other. What we think these things are? Well, I'm going to go down an entire list. And then you would think of the way in which these things have affected the minds of our people. The first difference that Willie Lynch pointed out to the Virginia slave owners was that they should point out the difference in age. Because I'm certain we who are here in the West and those who were colonized by Britain and other colonial interests would have heard in our lifetime young people making references to older people and older people making negative references also to younger people. So that was one of the first tools of division that was introduced. The other thing that was introduced was the issue of color or the shade of your skin. Today, these things still bring distrust, envy, and fear in the minds of our people. And we find it difficult to unify ourselves with our brothers and sisters. Another thing he introduced was the idea of intelligence as a competing factor, as a difference, as something to breed fear and mistrust. The other thing was size as a difference. Then sex. We've all heard of the gender wars and all that nonsense about which gender is smarter than the other gender. Also, the slaves were also made sensitive to the issue of the size of the plantation they are on versus the size that another slave was on. So if a slave left this plantation and was sent to work on the other plantation, he would see himself as being different because he came from a bigger, a better organized plantation. Today we still have people who does not understand how that translates into modern systems of management. You would hear people saying, boy, I have a government job, I good. What you doing? You working for that little small company over there. It's the same concept. It has been translated now differently. So slavery exists, but under different names. So now we don't say plantation, we say employer. See, I have a more of a powerful employer. So also they talk about the attitudes of the owners. So some people will say, I have it easy, my boss, he don't bother me, Once he come and he say, boy, I want you to do so and so. Once I do so and so, I could relax for the rest of the day. I just have to go in and sign. These are the things we say. But we don't realize that all of these things were conditionings that we receive. And they did not give it to us with a good intent. These mental concepts, these constructs were placed in our minds to create division, fear, distrust, and envy. Now, for those who may have been fortunate to attend some of these programming institutions, whether it's Scotland Yard, or whether it's Sandhurst, they would explain all of that to you, and they would show you how these things are used to manipulate people to get them to do as you want. The keys to such engineered behaviors and mindsets is to create disunity. So I would appeal to all of my people. Ifa teaches us that our purpose here is to make the world a better place, and in reality to bring the life of Orun to Aye. In other words, to bring the condition on earth as it is in Orun. So I will admonish our people to lose all of the behaviors that are destructive to us, all the things that causes the trauma. I've tried tonight to identify specifically some of the things that we may not be aware of that controls and conditions our behaviors. We need to pay attention to envy. We need to pay attention to distrust. We need to not be afraid of each other, despite what we are being told by other people. I always say, take the time off to get to know people and not let other people tell you who someone else is. That's called taking medicine for somebody else's sickness. Don't mistreat others because they have a different age to you, whether it be a young child or an elderly. Do not mistreat others because their hair or their skin or their eye color or something is different. Slavery is abuse and mistreatment of others. Because the term Slav has nothing to do with the abuse we underwent. That word was coined to misrepresent the abuse. We were not slaves. We were an abused, misused people who have been traumatized by the abuse. All right? And for all of the indigenous people, to include also people that are black-skinned like myself, who call themselves Carib, who call themselves Kalinago and Garifuna, they were prisoners of war. They were not slaves. And those of us who were dragged from thousands of miles away and brought here and forced to work to enrich somebody in England belonging to a royal family, or somebody in Spain belonging to a royal family, or somebody in France belonging to a royal family. We must dismiss these programs that has been placed in our minds. IFA encourages us to build strong families, to build strong communities through the practice of Iwa Rere, which is good character. And it also encourages us to practice Iwa Pele, which is gentle character. Because having a gentle character is what ensures that there is good communication. It is also associated to the Ibas we perform with water, so that the effect could be a cooling effect, which is what facilitates good communication. All right, with that, I want to close off for this week, and I want to encourage the members of the public as well as the members of our community to come out and support the Obatala Festival, which I think is this Saturday. All right, it is at Alberto Street in Woodbrook. It is important for us as a community to come out and to unite and to celebrate, in this particular instance, Obatala, who's the oldest of all the Orishas, and also the first Imale to be sent to help make the earth a habitable place. Our job, all of us who are here, our job is to make Aye a better place. So we go and we pay respect to the first one that was sent to improve this earth. All right, with that, I would like to say Odabo. See you next week. And my word of admonition is, you do good, you do it for yourself. You do bad, you do it for yourself. And I must clarify by saying yourself, I'm talking about not just you. I'm talking about for all of those who would come after you. Because when you do bad, what you do is you heap iniquities on the heads of your children. This is what Ifa teaches. All right? And with that, I will see you next Tuesday. And for those who would be attending the Obatala Festival, well, by the grace of Olodumare, I shall see you. Have a good evening.